The question of whether China would capitalize on a potential U.S. withdrawal from the international stage under a Trump-led administration is both timely and multifaceted. The dynamics of global power are constantly shifting, and a retreat by the United States could provide a significant opportunity for China to assert itself as the world's dominant superpower. To evaluate this potential scenario, we must analyze the historical precedents, geopolitical strategies, and the global implications of such a shift in leadership. 1. Understanding Trump's foreign policy and its impact. Donald Trump's presidency, 2017 to 2021, marked a sharp departure from traditional U.S. foreign policy, which had long emphasized global leadership through multilateralism, international alliances, and active engagement in world affairs. Instead, Trump pursued an America First agenda, which often prioritized domestic interests at the expense of international commitments. Some key elements of Trump's foreign policy included: A. Withdrawal from key agreements. Paris Climate Agreement. Trump announced the U.S. withdrawal in 2017, signaling a step back from global climate leadership. This created a vacuum that China quickly filled, promoting itself as a leader in green technology and renewable energy investments. Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP. By abandoning the TPP, the U.S. effectively ceded influence in the Asia-Pacific to China, which moved to strengthen its own trade networks, such as the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, RCEP. B. Weakened alliances. Trump's skepticism of NATO and criticism of allies for insufficient defense spending raised questions about U.S. commitment to collective security. His administration reduced U.S. participation in global institutions such as the United Nations and the World Health Organization, further isolating the U.S. from multilateral decision-making, bilateral trade wars. The trade war with China, characterized by tariffs and economic sanctions, disrupted global supply chains and created tensions that China used to rally domestic support and strengthen ties with other trading partners. These policies created strategic openings that China exploited to advance its own economic and geopolitical goals. 2. How China could capitalize on U.S. withdrawal. China has been actively working to position itself as a global leader, and a U.S. withdrawal from the international stage would accelerate this process. Below are the key areas where China could capitalize on such a scenario. AE, Economic Leadership Belt and Road Initiative, BRI. China's ambitious infrastructure project connects over 140 countries across Asia, Europe, and Africa, fostering economic dependence on China. Without the U.S. offering an alternative development model, many nations would be drawn deeper into China's orbit, cementing its economic dominance. Regional trade agreements. China has already taken a leading role in regional trade through agreements like RCEP. With the U.S. absent, China could expand its influence over global trade norms, further marginalizing American economic power. B. Technological domination. China's advancements in artificial intelligence, AI, 5G networks, and quantum computing position it as a global leader in emerging technologies. Companies like Huawei and Alibaba have become household names internationally. If the U.S. retreats from technological competition, China could set global standards for technology and infrastructure, particularly in developing nations. Diplomatic influence. China has strategically increased its presence in multilateral institutions like the United Nations, the World Health Organization, WHO, and the World Trade Organization, WTO. A U.S. withdrawal would allow China to shape global rules and norms, advancing its own vision of governance and development. D. Military power in the Asia-Pacific. The U.S. has long acted as a counterbalance to China's military ambitions in the Asia-Pacific. If the U.S. were to reduce its military presence, China could intensify its activities in the South China Sea, asserting control over disputed territories, escalate pressure on Taiwan, testing the limits of international resistance, expand its military bases and influence in strategic regions like Africa and the Indian Ocean. Third, risks and limitations for China. While a U.S. withdrawal would create opportunities, China would also face significant challenges in its bid to capitalize on the situation. A. Global distrust. China's aggressive tactics, such as debt-trap diplomacy through the Belt and Road Initiative, have sparked backlash in many countries. Nations like India, Australia, and Japan have openly opposed China's expansionist policies, forming alliances like the Quad, Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, to counterbalance Beijing's influence. B. Economic vulnerabilities. China's economy remains heavily reliant on trade with Western nations, particularly the U.S. Breakdown in U.S. China relations or economic instability caused by U.S. withdrawal could disrupt global markets, harming China's growth prospects. Domestic challenges. China faces internal issues that could limit its ability to capitalize on a U.S. retreat. A rapidly aging population and declining birth rates. Growing economic inequality and unrest in rural regions. Rising dissatisfaction among urban youth, as seen in sporadic protests. The risks of over-reliance on authoritarian governance, which could backfire in the face of prolonged economic hardship or international pressure. Fourth, a world without U.S. leadership. If the USA emergence of a multipolar world, in the absence of U.S. leadership, global power would likely shift toward a multipolar system, with countries like China, the European Union, and India competing for influence. Increased instability. The U.S. has traditionally acted as a stabilizing force in global conflicts. NATO and the United Nations. C. Decline of democratic values. China's authoritarian model, which emphasizes state control and surveillance, could gain traction globally, especially in developing nations. This would challenge the democratic values that have underpinned the post-World War II international order. 5. Can the U.S. reassert itself? A prolonged U.S. withdrawal would make it difficult for future administrations to regain lost ground. However, history shows that the U.S. has the capacity to reassert itself on the global stage, provided it addresses key challenges.